I want to say one final thing, talking about people talking too long. This is the format here, but I want to say a few words about doing music interviews because it's so much a part of what we do, and it can be something that is so special and memorable, and it can also be a big waste of time for listeners. First of all is that if you can arrange to pre-produce an interview with a musician, doing it at a time in the studio when it's not live on the air, go ahead and do that. And either edit it yourself or work with people who know how to edit it to create something that is more concise and more easily deliverable on the air. Start with music always. Okay, so let's talk about the live musician coming in. I think one mistake that we often make is that somebody is here in the studios. I keep using James McMurtry. Here's James McMurtry, who's in town today. He's doing a show. To start the segment with James McMurtry, it's so much better to start with a piece of music by James McMurtry, even if he's just walked in and say, James, how you doing? He says, hey, welcome to KUNM. Hey, let's start with something from your new album and then we'll talk to you. He says, okay, that sounds good. Play something. Because if you start an interview with a musician and the listener isn't familiar with that music, they're listening for 5-6 minutes. They have no context to even what type of musician this is, what genre they're playing in, how they sound, who they might cite as references. It's meaningless. So always make sure you're playing some music before you start talking. If they're there for 20 minutes or so, keep your talk segments to 3 or 5 minutes, but keep going back to the music. Again, because somebody is always joining your party. And if they join in the middle of a conversation and you talk for 10 or 15 minutes with somebody because you think that they've got to get back on the road, first of all, you just sort of need to work that out with the musician's manager or the musician before you start. But second of all, again, it's the listener. It's like if you're talking, I heard somebody talk with a musician on a radio station for 30 minutes. Not only did I not hear the musician's name referenced, but I never heard any music. And I had no idea. I had to bail on it eventually. Well, I listened to it out of curiosity to see how long it would go. But it was not a good piece of radio. So keep your talk segments to 3 or 5 minutes and go back in and out of music. This is a little pet peeve of mine on the screen. It says, avoid tour itineraries. I think one of the least interesting things that you can ask a musician is, so where have you been on tour? You know, he says, well, we were in Boulder, and before that we were up in Seattle and Olympia, and you know, there are places that aren't where your audience is. Maybe say, have you ever been to New Mexico before? What's your favorite place to go in New Mexico when you come here? What's your favorite hot chili place? I mean, those have more meanings than talking about, you know, where they've been on the road or where they're going next, because that just turns into a list. Work their name in often. You know, it sounds a little awkward if you've talked with them for 3 or 4 minutes, but say, well, James McMurtry, tell us who you were listening to when you were 7 years old. Because that, again, picks up that listener who just tuned in the last 5 minutes. You're helping them out. You're pulling them in, and you're saying, here's the reference point you need to know. Listen to what they're saying. Make it a conversation. Feel comfortable to interrupt politely. If they're talking too long, you know, you can say, well, let me ask you this. Question for both you and the audience. Bring things that you're authentically curious about, but also ask a question that somebody who's listening, who has no idea who this person is, would like to know. You might be an expert on James McMurtry, but if you bring that expertise in and your questions are at a high level, you're not performing the service that most of the people who are listening who are not James McMurtry aficionados represent. Think about what do you and what do they, your listeners, really want to know. There again, go back to music frequently. Make sure that if they're playing live music that you get help and mic it well. And I think it's always interesting to talk about what else besides music musicians are passionate about. Find some way to get there, whether it's food, whether it's leisure activities. I was just reading a book by a friend who had a chance to talk to a famous football player like 30 years ago. And he was a kid, reporter at the time. His first time in an NFL locker room. But this particular player who was talking to all the other reporters about the game and rushing, he'd also started to do some acting. And so my friend said, well, what about those movies you're in? And the sports star just brightened up and started talking very animatedly about this other new passion in his life. And it got very far away, noticeably, from the sort of boring, rote sports answers about, giving it 100% on the field and, we've got to do better about this and about that. So that's a good example. And find the humor, too, and just keep it light and enjoy yourself. Find out what their humor spot is. If you can get there, then it's going to be a great moment. So I've talked a long time. God bless you if you've been able to listen to all this. It shows that you're truly interested in the work that you're doing for your radio station as a music presenter. Keep these words in mind. You got to hear this, because this is the passion that you're going to be bringing to your work. If you can do that, keep a few of these things in mind, work closely with your program director, and show interest in your own improvement. You will be, over time, a better announcer as time goes on. You'll be more pleased with your work, and your audience will love you for it. Think audience, thanks for your service to public radio, and thanks for listening to me.